The scariest person isn't the one who hates you. It's the one who used to need you and then suddenly doesn't. In this video, the psychology of people who disappear and come back different, you will understand what really happens in that missing time and why the return feels like meeting a stranger wearing the same face. I'll show you the signs you ignored, the quiet steps they took while you were talking, and the exact reason they return colder, cleaner, and harder to manipulate. So you stop chasing shadows and start reading patterns. Your ego tells you a bedtime story. They're overwhelmed, they're confused, they'll miss me. But sometimes they're not confused, they're focused. You want to know what they're doing while you're refreshing your messages like a little while you're waiting? They're detoxing from you, from the role you pushed them into, from the version of themselves that kept performing for your approval. And that's the part that burns. Here's the pattern. First, they reduce stimulus, less talking, less reacting, less proving. Then comes isolation. No audience, no feedback, no arguments to win. Then, recalibration. They rebuild identity in a room where nobody can negotiate it. And that room changes people. So listen to me. Don't click away. Not now. You finish this video to the last second, because one missed detail will make you misread them, and you will pay for it with your pride. If you can't handle it right now, save the video, bookmark it. Come back when you're ready to hear the truth without flinching. When they come back, don't look for the old weaknesses. Don't look for the old empathy you used to press like a button. Look for what's missing, the need to explain. That's when you realize you didn't lose contact, you lost access. As always, close your eyes and focus with me very carefully. First, the first reason people disappear and come back different is not space. No, it's a correction. A brutal one. Here's what it looks like in real life. There's a friend who always answers, always shows up, always explains. They're the easy person, the dependable one. Then one day, you notice something small, too small to panic about. They stop reacting to bait. They don't defend themselves. They don't argue to be understood. And your brain goes, oh, they're tired. They'll be back. But that's not tired, that's training. They're training their nervous system to survive without your feedback. They're starving a version of themselves that was addicted to being needed. Because the old them got rewards from being available. A little praise, a little, you're the only one who gets me. A little guilt when they didn't reply fast enough. And then something snaps. Not loudly, quietly. Maybe it's a humiliating moment in public. Maybe it's watching you ignore them, then suddenly want them when you're bored. Maybe it's realizing they're only valued when they're useful. Or it's the night they hear themselves begging for basic respect and they think, what am I doing? So they disappear to break the reward system. No audience. No performance, no negotiating their worth. They delete the explain myself reflex. They practice not checking if you noticed. That's why the silence feels personal. It's not punishment, it's surgery. Like turning off a drug and learning to live with the shaking. And when they come back, watch the differences. They respond slower on purpose. They speak in shorter sentences. They don't overshare. They don't chase closure. They're not trying to win you anymore. And this is where most people make the fatal mistake. They look for the old soft spot. They press the old buttons. They try the old script, and nothing happens. Because the person you knew was a phase you benefited from. Keep watching, because the next part isn't about why they leave. It's about what they build in the dark, and the one signal that tells you whether they came back healed or came back dangerous. Second, some people don't disappear to heal. They disappear to test reality. Because there's a type of person who feels powerful only when they can still pull you, when they can still make you check your phone, when they can still make you explain yourself. So they vanish, clean, no warning, no closure. And you start doing their work for them, building stories, excuses, fantasies. That's the trap. Real example, a girl posts like nothing happened. She laughs in public, she's busy, she leaves you on scene. Then, weeks later, she returns with one casual message. Hey, how have you been? That's not a greeting, that's a temperature check. She's not asking about your life. She's checking, do you still react like before? Do you still rush? Do you still soften? Do you still apologize first? Because if you do, she learns something. She learns she can disappear and your standards will stay on the floor. And don't lie to yourself. You call it missing them. But half of what you're feeling is withdrawal from uncertainty. Your brain hates unfinished endings, so it chases them like a puzzle. That's why the return feels electric. It's not love, it's relief. Watch the behavior when they come back different. They come back with a new tone, cooler, selective, almost scripted. They mention how they've changed. They talk like they're above drama, but they still want one thing: proof that you're still available to their absence. Here's the giveaway. They return without accountability. No, I was wrong. No, I hurt you. Just a reset button. And if you press that button for them, you teach them the disappearance works. But if you don't, if you stay calm, slow, unreadable, something strange happens. They either respect you or they punish you. And that reaction tells you what kind of person you're dealing with. I mean, listen, this is subtle. The silence is the message. Keep watching, because the next section shows the hidden motive they'll never admit out loud, and the quiet move that flips the power without you begging, chasing, or exploding. Third, sometimes they disappear because they finally saw the role you assigned them. And they felt disgusted wearing it. This is the part people don't like hearing, so listen carefully. You can be a good person and still make someone smaller without noticing. Not with insults, with expectations, with the way you only respond when they perform, with the way you reward the version of them that's convenient. And they play along until they can't. Real example. A guy in a relationship who's always the fixer. He apologizes first, he explains everything, he smooths every conflict. At the start, it looks like love. But over time, he realizes he's not a partner, he's a service. And one day, one tiny moment, he hears his own voice begging for basic respect, and he thinks, nah, not again. So he disappears, not to make you suffer, but to stop participating in a version of himself he no longer respects. He goes silent because every conversation with you pulls him back into the old costume, the nice one, the available one, the please don't leave one. Silence is the only boundary you can't negotiate. And while he's gone, something ugly but useful happens. He watches his own patterns like a scientist. He notices what he tolerates. He notices what he excuses. He notices what he confuses with loyalty. He rewires himself through deprivation. That's why the return feels uncanny. They come back with fewer words, fewer emotional displays, fewer proofs. They don't try to convince you they changed. They just act like someone who no longer needs permission to exist. And that's when you feel it, this cold clarity. They're not here to be understood anymore. They're here to be respected. You might even hear them say something that sounds harmless, like, "Yeah, I've been busy, working on myself." But what they really mean is, "I removed the parts of me you could control." And here's the dangerous mistake people make. They try to drag the old version back with guilt, nostalgia, or remember when. No, don't do that. Because if they disappeared for identity, and you try to reattach the old chains, you'll trigger the version of them you've never seen. Fourth, there's a kind of disappearance that isn't about you at all, but it still rewrites the person you knew. It happens when someone gets exposed quietly, not caught in a dramatic way, more like they see themselves in a mirror they can't unsee. Like hearing their own voice, realizing it sounds needy. Real example, a woman who's always the entertainer. She keeps the group alive, she posts, she jokes, she's the fun one. Then one day she notices something. When she stops performing, nobody checks on her. That moment doesn't break her heart first. It breaks her strategy. So she disappears, not to punish the group, but to answer a brutal question. Who am I when I'm not useful, not funny, not available? That question is dangerous. In the silence, she removes noise. No dopamine scrolling, no constant updates, no audience votes. She starts rebuilding her identity from the inside, like lifting weights in a locked room. At first, it's messy. She relapses into checking. She types messages and deletes them. She almost comes back early, but she holds the line. Then she returns, and you feel the difference in seconds. She laughs less, but it's real. She shares less, but she's stable. She doesn't explain her absence with a long story, because she's no longer negotiating her existence with your attention. People around her call it acting weird. They say, "You changed." Of course she did. She stopped feeding a personality that only survived on being liked. And here's the cliff edge. When someone disappears to rebuild like this, the return can make you feel guilty for the first time, without them saying a word. Not because they're manipulating you, because their calm exposes your habits. You'll notice it in tiny moves, a one-word reply where there used to be paragraphs, a polite, "I'm good," where there used to be oversharing. Fifth, this one is the most dangerous because it looks like maturity. but it can be something colder, a recalculated relationship with pain. Some people disappear after a single moment that humiliates them inside. Not in public, not dramatic, just a quiet realization. I keep giving access to people who don't value it. And that sentence becomes a weapon. Think of a guy who always replies fast. He double texts. He apologizes for being too much. Then one day he sends a message that matters, something real, and he gets a dry reply. No warmth, no effort, just, okay. That's the moment the nervous system learns a new rule. Attention is not love. Availability is not respect. So he disappears. He stops feeding the loop that made him chase crumbs. He stops arguing for clarity. He stops trying to be chosen by someone who only wants convenience. And while he's gone, he doesn't just heal, he studies. He replays conversations like evidence. He notices where he laughed to avoid conflict, where he agreed to keep peace, where he swallowed his standards to keep someone close. And he starts building a new boundary system. Simple, brutal, quiet. The scary part? When he comes back, he doesn't come back emotional. He comes back calibrated. Real life signs. He replies, but not instantly. He listens, but doesn't over-explain. He smiles, but it doesn't ask for permission. And he will let silence sit in the room without rescuing it. That's why you feel distance, because your old control tricks don't land anymore. Guilt doesn't pull him. Confusion doesn't hook him. Even affection, if it's performative, doesn't move him. It's like trying to press buttons on a device that updated overnight. Here's the viral truth people miss. Some returns are forgiveness, and some returns are observation. They came back to watch if you still treat them the same, to see if the pattern repeats, to see if you respect the new version or demand the old one. And if you demand the old one, if you push, guilt, rush, corner, you'll see the thing they built in the dark. A calm no that doesn't shake. Keep watching, because the next part exposes the single sentence that reveals whether their change is peace or a mask made from resentment. Picture the return. They sit across from you, same face, different gravity. You joke, trying to pull the old warmth back. So, you finally remembered me? And they don't laugh the way they used to. They just tilt their head, like, interesting, that's your move. That micro reaction is everything, because it tells you their emotions are no longer driving the wheel. Their standards are. Sixth. Now we get to the kind of disappearance that rewires someone into a stranger. There are people who vanish after they realize you don't respect words, you respect consequences. They tried honesty. They tried talking it out. They tried being patient. And every time the same thing happened, the moment they explained, you negotiated. You didn't hear them. You bargained with them. So they stopped giving you explanations you can twist. They stopped giving you openings to argue. They stopped giving you their pain as a discussion topic. That's when the disappearing starts. Real example, a friend who always forgave small disrespect. The jokes at their expense, the late replies, the last-minute cancellations. They kept smiling. They kept being cool. Then one day they asked for one simple thing: consistency. And the answer they get is a shrug, a joke, "You're overthinking." Something inside them learns a new language: boundaries. So they disappear and build a rule set, not feelings, rules. They write down what they tolerate, what they don't, and what happens next. If you cross this line, they don't explode. They exit, quietly. No speech, no closure debate. That's why it feels cold, because it's consistent. And when they come back different, watch the new signals. They don't ask for respect. They behave like it's required. They don't chase reassurance. They observe behavior. They don't answer every message. They choose. They replaced anxiety with standards. Here's the scary twist. Your mind will try to romanticize it. You'll say, they matured, they healed, they found peace. Sometimes. But sometimes it's not peace. It's controlled distance. Watch how they speak now. Fewer maybe, fewer I guess, fewer apologies for existing. They pause before answering, like they're checking their own body for a reaction. And you'll notice you can't rush them anymore. If you pressure them, they don't get louder, they get quieter. They look away, then back, and the conversation ends. That's not weakness, that's discipline. And this is where you must stay to the last second, because most people miss the difference. If you leave early, you'll keep confusing a boundary with a revenge plan. So listen. A healed person returns with calm and clarity. A resentful person returns with calm and calculation. They look identical on the surface. Same silence, same short replies, same unreadable face. The difference is hidden in one thing: what they do when you offer closeness again. Example: you apologize sincerely. You show changed behavior. You offer accountability. A healed person softens, slowly, carefully. A resentful one pretends to soften, just long enough to measure you. To measure how much access they can take back without risk. And if you feel a strange tension, like you're being evaluated, not loved, that's not your imagination. That's the new dynamic. And the craziest part? You'll call it mysterious. But what you're feeling is loss of leverage. Seventh, there's another disappearance that changes a person permanently because it's triggered by a lesson they didn't want to learn. It happens when they finally see the pattern. Every time they show emotion, it gets used against them. Every time they confess fear, someone stores it. Every time they say, "This hurt me," the other person calls them dramatic. So they stop donating truth to people who weaponize it. Real example: a boyfriend who admits he's jealous just once in a quiet moment. And later, in an argument, she smirks and says, "Aw, still insecure?" That single line teaches him something. Vulnerability is not always met with care. Sometimes it's collected. So he disappears. Not to punish her, no. Not even that. He disappears to practice being untouchable. In the silence, they build an internal vault. They share less, react less, reveal less. They start answering with neutral words. They stop giving you the real version during conflict. because the real version is expensive. And when they come back, you feel the change as a weird calm. They don't defend themselves. They don't chase misunderstanding. They don't ask, "Do you still love me?" They stop needing emotional refunds. You'll try to pull the old intimacy back with nostalgia. You'll say, "Remember when you used to tell me everything?" And they'll give you a polite smile, like you just asked for a password. Watch the microsign. They pause before answering personal questions. Not because they're hiding something illegal, relax, because they're checking if you've earned the real answer. And here's what makes this viral. Most people think they want honesty until honesty makes them accountable. So the disappeared person comes back with a new filter. They test your reactions with small truths first. A tiny boundary, a tiny no, a tiny delay. Then they watch your face, your tone, your patience. If you punish that small truth, you never get the big one again. That's why some returns feel like a wall. It's not arrogance, it's learned protection. And if you're smart, you'll stop trying to break the wall and start asking what built it. Keep watching, because next comes the part people deny. The moment they come back, not to reconnect, but to replace you. Another one, a friend who always explained themselves when you were upset. They'd write paragraphs, apologize for things they didn't even do, bend until they broke. Then they disappear. And when they come back, you get one sentence. "I hear you." That's it. Because they stopped begging to be seen as good. And here's where your ego panics. Because you lost the old leverage, their need to be understood. So you start throwing bait, guilt, jokes, accusations, fake concern. You've changed. Who are you now? Are you okay? And they just watch you. This is the key. The new version doesn't react to your words first. They react to your pattern. So if you want to understand the psychology, understand it, you have to watch what happens after the return, when comfort is offered. Or do they accept comfort and keep scanning for the trap? That difference decides whether you're dealing with growth or a person who is rebuilding a life where nobody gets free access again. And next, I'll show you the small sentence they say on the return. The sentence that sounds normal, but exposes everything. 8th. This is the disappearance nobody talks about, because it sounds cruel. Not because you were evil. Not because you were evil. Sometimes you were just attached to their weakest era. You knew the version that apologized too much, the version that stayed too long, the version that kept explaining itself like a hostage. And you got comfortable with that version. Real example. A coworker who used to tolerate disrespect, laugh at jokes that hurt, stay late to prove value. Then one day they disappear. New job, new circle, new boundaries, no goodbye speech. Weeks later they reappear online, acting unfamiliar. Short captions, clean energy, no oversharing. And you feel offended because your brain says, wait, where's the old access? Here's what happened in the dark. Identity separation. They cut off triggers. They remove people who pull them back into old habits. They stop visiting places that remind them who they used to be. It's not drama, it's conditioning. You know how an addict avoids certain streets? Same principle. Because some relationships are not built on love, they're built on reflex. You say a certain phrase, they shrink. You get cold, they chase. You go silent, they panic and apologize. They disappear to kill those reflexes. And then you see them come back different. They answer slower, but not to punish you, just because urgency isn't their personality anymore. They don't ask, "Are you mad?" because they don't live in fear of moods. They don't explain why they left because they refuse to debate their recovery. And that silence makes you invent a story. You'll think, they got arrogant, or someone changed them, or they're trying to look unbothered. But the truth is simpler. They stopped being trainable. And this is where you need to keep watching, because the next mistake people make is deadly. They try to re-trigger the old version. They use nostalgia. They use guilt. They use, "Remember when?" And if it works once, even once, the old chains start growing back. So the upgraded person returns with a test. Not a loud test, a quiet one. They offer you a normal conversation, then they watch what you do with it. Do you respect the new pace? Do you respect the new boundary? Do you respond to their calm with calm? Or do you demand the old emotional performance? Real life detail. They will stop answering mid-conversation if it turns manipulative. Not with anger, with exit. They'll say, "We can talk later." And they actually mean it. That used to be impossible for them. Now here's the twist that makes this terrifying. Sometimes they don't come back to reconnect. They come back to confirm their upgrade worked. They want to see if you still have access to their old self. If you don't, they leave again without guilt. Because the new identity doesn't negotiate with the past. And you might catch one human slip, one tiny one pause, one breath, because part of them still remembers the old attachment. But they don't obey it anymore. Keep watching, because next is where it gets surgical. The moment they come back different, and you realize they're not avoiding you. They're avoiding who you turn them into. You'll notice it. When you send a long message and they reply with 3 words. Not heartless, trained. Explanations invite bargaining. Next, I'll show the one reaction that proves they're truly changed, or just acting. Stay with me. Ninth. Here's the version that makes people feel haunted. Because but dangerous. Because they don't disappear to escape you. They disappear to escape the story you keep forcing them to live inside. And the moment you understand that, everything changes. Because some people don't vanish after a fight. They vanish after a pattern. After the 10th time they felt misunderstood. After the 100th time they noticed you only listen when they threaten to leave. They don't leave because they're weak. They leave because they're tired of being predictable. Real example. A friend you always call dramatic. Every time they try to explain something serious, you joke it away. You say, "Relax." You say, "It's not that deep." And they laugh with you because it's easier than fighting. Then one day, they stop laughing. Not angrily, not loudly, they just stop. And after that, they disappear. In that silence, they do something that feels almost unreal. They stop giving you emotional evidence. They stop proving what they feel. They stop presenting their inner life like a courtroom case. They realize the more they explain, the less you respect them. So the rebuild begins, but not in a self-love way, more like identity withdrawal. They detach from the version of themselves that needed validation. They practice not reacting to messages. They practice not checking if you noticed. They practice not correcting your misunderstandings, because correcting you was their addiction. And yeah, this is where your ego starts screaming. You tell yourself they're playing games. You say they want attention. You call them cold. But the truth is uglier. They're learning how to live without needing your permission to be real. Now pay attention to the return, because the return is never loud. They come back with a new posture. They speak like someone who doesn't need to be believed. They don't over-clarify. They don't defend. They don't chase the right impression. They come back with fewer emotional fingerprints. Example, you ask, "Why did you disappear?" Old them would panic, explain, apologize, offer proof. New them just says, "I needed distance." That's it. No autobiography, no begging you to understand. And that tiny sentence is not rude. It's a boundary with no negotiation clause. Here's the viral part people miss. When someone disappears to escape the story you assigned them, they come back and refuse to play any role. Not the villain, not the victim, not the savior. They'll be polite, but ungrabbable. They'll be present, but not available. And your brain will hate them for that, because you can't label them anymore. You'll try to pull them back into a role with subtle moves, a joke that tests shame, a compliment that tests neediness, a guilt line like, "You really hurt me, you know." And they'll answer differently. Not with an argument, not with tears, with calm, with a pause, with silence that doesn't rush to fix your feelings. And if that makes you furious, good, because it reveals what you actually wanted from them. Control, not connection. Now, human moment, listen. I'm not saying you're evil. I'm saying patterns are. And the disappeared person is usually the first one to stop feeding the pattern. 10th. This disappearance doesn't start with anger. It starts with observation. There are people who vanish because they finally notice your cycle. Not what you say, what you repeat. How you get warm when you want something and cold when you get it. How you apologize when you're scared of losing them, then drift the moment you feel safe again. Patterns don't lie. Real example, a friend who always checks on you. They remember your stress, your exams, your family drama. But the moment they need support, you disappear. Not intentionally, maybe, but consistently. The first time they excuse it. The second time, they rationalize it. The third time, they start tracking it. They watch the timestamps. They watch who you show up for. They watch how fast you reply when you're bored versus when you're busy. They watch how you treat them when nobody is watching. And slowly, something changes inside them. They stop expecting fairness. That's when they disappear. Not dramatically, not with a speech. They just remove their energy, like pulling a plug out of a wall. And the silence feels loud because you were living on their attention without noticing. Here's the part that stings. You only realize their value when the service ends. You think you miss them, but you mostly miss the way they made you feel important. Cruel, isn't it? Now watch what happens in their alone time. They don't cry all day. They don't heal in a cute, inspirational way. They study. They read people. They replay interactions like footage. They learn the difference between love and convenience. And they practice saying no in their head until it stops shaking. Then comes the return. And the return is where the personality shift becomes obvious. They come back polite, but not generous. They come back present, but not emotionally available. They ask fewer questions about your life. They offer fewer invitations. They stop saving conversations when they get awkward. Because they're no longer trying to keep the connection alive alone. Real life moment. You text them something normal, like, "Hey, what's up? Long time." Old them would reply with warmth, relief, maybe even an apology for disappearing. New them replies with one line, "All good, hope you're well." That's it. And you feel it like a door closing softly. Here's the viral truth. That short reply is not rudeness. It's a diagnosis. It means they measured the relationship and the numbers didn't make sense. They realized you only invest when you're afraid, so they removed the fear. Now, human slip, listen. Sometimes the new calm is real growth, and sometimes it's emotional bankruptcy. They're not over it, they're done paying. And the only way to tell is what happens when you finally offer real effort. If you show consistent change, a healed person will test you slowly, then soften. But if they're resentful, they'll accept your effort like a trophy and keep you at arm's length anyway. That's the difference between protection and punishment. Eleventh, this disappearance happens when they realize something terrifying. You only love the version of them that suffers. Yeah, read that again in your head. Because there are relationships where the bond is built on rescue. You feel close to them when they're broken. You feel needed when they're confused. You feel powerful when they're emotional. And they feel loved only when they're bleeding attention. Real example, a girl who calls you when she's anxious. You calm her down, you stay up late, you become her anchor. But when she's stable, when she's happy, when she's busy, she forgets you exist. That's not always evil. Sometimes it's just unconscious dependency. But the effect is the same. Love becomes a transaction with pain as the currency. So one day, the person who's always needing help wakes up and feels disgust. Not at you, at themselves. They realize they've trained their own nervous system to perform distress for connection. And they hate that. That's when they disappear. Not to get attention, to break the addiction loop. Pain to comfort, to closeness, to temporary calm, to pain again. They leave to learn how to self-regulate without an audience. In that silence, they do something that looks cold from the outside. They stop sending signals. No "I'm struggling" posts, no vague sadness stories, no dramatic exits. Because they're trying to see who stays when there's no crisis to respond to. And that test reveals everything. And when they come back different, they come back quieter. Not because they don't feel, because they learned not to weaponize feelings, even accidentally. They learned to sit with discomfort without calling you as a sedative. That change makes them feel like a stranger, because your old role disappears too. That's the part people don't admit. You don't just miss them. You miss being needed. You miss being the hero. You miss the emotional leverage of being the only one who can calm them down. Brutal, right? Now watch the return moment. You'll try to recreate the old intimacy by offering rescue. You'll say, "Are you okay? Talk to me, I'm here." Old them would collapse into that. New them says, "I'm fine." And they mean it. Not as a weapon, as a skill. They start sharing information instead of emotion. They talk about their day without begging for reassurance. They set boundaries without apologizing. They leave conversations that feel draining, quietly. Because they're protecting the new stability. Here's the viral twist. Their new calm can make you feel rejected, even if they still care. Because the relationship used to be loud, now it's controlled. And controlled love feels cold to someone addicted to chaos. Controlled love feels boring to someone who only recognizes intensity. So they come back different, and you have two options. You adjust to stable connection, or you provoke a crisis to feel close again. And if you choose the second option, you'll lose them twice. Keep watching, because next is the one that looks like confidence. They return smiling, calm, almost charming. But the charm is hiding a final decision they made while you weren't looking. Twelfth, this disappearance is the quietest one. Because it happens while they're still there. Yeah, they're still replying, still liking posts, still saying, "I'm fine." But inside, they already left. They're emotionally evacuating without making a scene. And most people don't notice until it's too late. Real example. Someone who used to argue when they felt misunderstood. They'd fight for the connection. They'd demand clarity. They'd try to fix it. Then suddenly, they stop. No more questions. No more, "Can we talk?" Just polite agreement. That's not peace. That's resignation. Here's what's happening in the dark. They're collecting data. Not drama, data. They watch how you treat them when you're stressed, how you treat them when you're winning, how you treat them when you don't need anything. They stop reacting so they can see you clearly. And this is the scary part. They start testing you without announcing it. Small tests, a delayed reply, a gentle no, a boundary stated once, calmly. And they watch if you respect it or try to override it. Real life moment. They say, "I'm going to sleep early tonight." Old you might say, "Just 5 minutes," or send more messages anyway. Or you get annoyed. You've changed. And in their head, a silent checkbox gets marked. Not hate, a conclusion. Then comes the real disappearance, the external one. They vanish after they've already detached internally. That's why the return feels different. Because when they come back, they're not searching for reasons to stay. They're verifying the decision they already made. And this is why people get shocked. You think the disappearance came out of nowhere. No. It came out of months of quiet observations you ignored. Now watch the return behavior in this type. They come back civil. They smile. They even sound warm for a moment. But the warmth has a limit. It doesn't expand the way it used to, because it's managed. Real example. They meet you again and the conversation is smooth. You laugh, you talk, you feel hope. Then you try to push for closeness, plans, deep talks, late night calls, and they step back with one sentence. I'm trying to keep things simple. That sentence is a lock. It sounds healthy, but it's also distance. Here's the difference between healthy distance and emotional exit. Healthy distance still builds something. Exit distance only maintains surface peace while protecting the new life underneath. You'll notice it in details. They don't ask follow-up questions like before. They don't remember tiny things you told them. They don't chase the mood when it drops. They let awkward silence live. That's not confidence. That's reduced investment. Humans slip. Listen, sometimes they still care. Sometimes they even miss you. But missing you isn't the same as choosing you. And the person who disappeared internally learns that difference with pain. And if you're honest, you'll realize something. This kind of return isn't asking for a second chance. It's giving you one last look at who they used to be. Keep watching, because the next part is the final shift. The disappearance that creates the cleanest transformation. The one where they come back different. And you can't even argue with it, because it's calm and it's final. Thirteenth. This is the final disappearance. The one that doesn't come from emotion. It comes from certainty. Because after all the patterns, all the tests, all the silent audits, there's a moment where the brain stops asking, what if? And it starts saying, so that's who you are. That sentence ends entire timelines. Real example. You betray a boundary once. Not the loud kind, the small kind people excuse. You mock something they trusted you with. You ignore a clear request. You dismiss their pain with a joke. And you think it'll be fine because they've forgiven before. But this time, they don't react the old way. They don't argue. They don't threaten to leave. They just go quiet. That quiet isn't weakness. It's the moment their nervous system stops bargaining. They feel the truth settle in their body like weight. If I stay, I'm choosing disrespect. So they disappear, not to teach you a lesson, but to stop teaching themselves the wrong one. And in the dark, they simplify their life. They remove complicated conversations. They stop revisiting old wounds. They stop needing closure from people who don't understand accountability. They build routines that don't require your cooperation. They build a life that doesn't include your permission. That's why when they come back, it feels final. Not angry, not dramatic. Final. And this is where your ego screams the loudest. Because you can fight anger. You can argue with accusations. You can negotiate with emotions. But you can't negotiate with calm certainty. Calm certainty is a closed door with no handle. Watch the return moment in this type. They'll be polite. They'll be respectful. They might even smile. but the smile doesn't invite you in. It's a goodbye that doesn't need words. They'll say things like, "I wish you the best. I'm focusing on my life. Take care." And if you push for why, you won't get a speech. You'll get one sentence, something simple, something surgical. Because the final version doesn't explain itself to people who ignored explanations. It doesn't beg, it doesn't plead, it doesn't perform pain for validation. It just chooses. And here's the last truth. Sometimes they come back different, not to reconnect, but to show you, quietly, what you lost access to. Not revenge, not flexing, just reality. So now you understand the psychology. Disappearing can be avoidance, but it can also be evolution. And the return? The return is the proof. And if you stayed until the end, you're not like most people. Most people click off the moment the truth gets uncomfortable. But you didn't. You watched the whole thing, every second, because some part of you knows this pattern isn't content. It's a warning and a map. So, here's what happens next. Listen carefully. The next video isn't going to explain why they disappear. It's going to expose what to do when they come back. How to read the first message. How to spot the hidden test in their tone. How to tell if their change is growth or a mask built from resentment. And the one mistake that makes you lose them twice. You'll feel it in your chest when I say it, because you've made it before. So don't disappear on me now. If you're still here, you're already in too deep to stay ignorant. Save this video if you need to. Rewatch it when your emotions cool down. But don't pretend you didn't hear it. And thank you for watching to the very end, for having the patience most people don't have anymore. I respect that. If this hit something real in you, leave a like, subscribe, because the next part is the one people avoid. And if you want to stay ahead of the pattern, turn on notifications. Because next time, we're going to talk about the return and the moment power silently changes hands. Now you know.